Welcome back after the break. You're watching Indus News and I'm Fizza Jamal with our latest stories in detail. We start from India, where nearly 2 million people have been rendered stateless after the Assam government excluded them from its list of citizens. Assam's BJP-controlled administration says it plans to deport undocumented Bangladeshi Muslim immigrants. The state's population is 34% Muslim, the second highest of any Indian state. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan said the international community must take notice of the ethnic cleansings of Muslims in India. He said India's illegal annexation of occupied Kashmir is also a part of a wider anti-Muslim policy. Economic growth in India has fallen to its lowest level since Prime Minister Narendra Modi took power 5 years ago. The National Statistical Office reports GDP growth for the 3 months up to June dipped to 5%. The growth rate for the same period last year was 8%. Government data also shows a rapid deceleration from 5.8% growth in the first quarter of this year. But the Modi administration has sought to deflect criticism of its economic policies.
This has been on account of both exogenous and endogenous factors. The government is quite alive to the situation, especially global headwinds arising out of deceleration in the developed economies, and Sino-American trade conflict has contributed to the slowdown.
Despite the deflection, many economists believe India's GDP will continue to exhibit negative growth rate this year. Moving on, Pakistan has welcomed the U.S. House Committee on Foreign Affairs' decision to hold a hearing on the situation in Indian-occupied Kashmir soon. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi described the decision as a major development for the disputed territory. In an interview, Qureshi said dialogue with India is only possible if it ends the curfew and other human rights violations in Kashmir. Staying on the same issue, India has detained 4,500 civilians in occupied Kashmir since August the 5th under the controversial Public Safety Act. The law gives Indian forces sweeping powers to detain anyone for up to 2 years without trial. The principal planning secretary in Indian-occupied Kashmir, Rohit Kansal, says politicians, businessmen, lawyers, and social activists are being held under the draconian law. Indian occupation forces have arrested over 10,000 Kashmiris so far. Meanwhile, India has scrutinized about 3,500 social media accounts belonging to individuals posting pro-Kashmir comments. India has written to Twitter asking for many accounts to be suspended. Human Rights Watch says India's clampdown in occupied Kashmir has deprived people of vital healthcare facilities. In a report, the rights body said Kashmiris no longer have access to life-saving treatments such as chemotherapy and dialysis. Human Rights Watch said the situation in Indian-occupied Kashmir is deteriorating with time. It condemned the arrests of Kashmiri doctors by Indian occupation forces. Moving on, Afghan government troops have killed 34 Taliban fighters in clashes in the northwestern city of Kunduz. Interior Ministry says the militants were killed in ground and air operations in 3 areas of the city. The ministry says clearance operations are also underway. The fighting began after the militants launched an assault on the city early morning. The Public Health Department says 3 civilians have been killed and 41 others are injured. Taliban spokesman Zabiullah Mujahid claims the group captured several important buildings. Earlier, presidential spokesman Siddiq Siddiqui says security forces are repelling the attack in which the enemy suffered heavy casualties. This is the 3rd time Kunduz has come under attack since the Taliban briefly captured it in 2015. U.S. President Donald Trump says Washington had good negotiations with the Taliban, but a deal has not yet been reached. President Trump says the number of troops in Afghanistan will be reduced to 8,600. Earlier, the Taliban said they are close to a deal with the United States as the final points are being discussed in negotiations. The U.S. and Taliban are engaged in their 9th round of peace talks in Doha to end the 18-year-long war. A U.S. serviceman has been killed during combat operations in Afghanistan. NATO has reported the latest American casualty while U.S. diplomats are in Doha negotiating a peace deal with the Taliban. NATO's Resolute Support Mission says the latest death raises the number of U.S. soldiers killed in Afghanistan this year to 15. 2 others died just last week. 14,000 U.S. soldiers are currently deployed in the country. The U.S. has also set a trial date for the alleged master planner of the 9/11 attacks, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. He will be tried along with 4 other men at a military court in Guantanamo Bay from January 2021. The men are charged with war crimes, including terrorism and the murder of 3,000 people. The 9/11 Commission report named Khalid Sheikh Mohammed as the principal architect of the attacks. 10 American teenagers have been wounded in a shooting during a high school football game in Alabama. Mobile Police Chief Lawrence Batiste said it is unclear whether there was a fight before the shooting broke out. He said half of the gunshot victims are in critical condition.
10 individuals injured from the age of 15, ranging from age 15 to 18. It's not acceptable in our community. We won't tolerate it. We'll be more aggressive in what we do as a law enforcement community to hold those individuals accountable.
In Palestine, Israeli forces have wounded 87 Palestinians during weekly protests at the Gaza border. Medics say 44 demonstrators were shot with live rounds. A journalist and a medic are also among the wounded. The protesters were calling on Israel to lift its blockade of the Gaza Strip imposed in 2007. Over 300 Palestinians have been killed since the weekly protests were launched in March 2018. The U.S. Treasury Department has blacklisted the Iranian oil tanker Dorian and imposed sanctions on its captain. The ship has been at the center of a diplomatic controversy since it was seized by Gibraltar in July for busting EU sanctions on Syria. The Treasury Department says the vessel has been declared blocked property under an anti-terrorist order. It says anyone providing assistance to the tanker will be sanctioned by the U.S. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the ship is heading towards Syria. The UN atomic watchdog says Iran has scaled down its compliance with the 2015 nuclear deal. In a report, the International Atomic Energy Agency said Tehran has exceeded the limits of both enriched and refined uranium. It said Iran's enriched uranium stock is still below the level it possessed before the deal. Iran's envoy to the IAEA says the new report verifies Tehran's commitment to the nuclear deal. Iran breached the enriched uranium stockpile limit in July in retaliation to U.S. withdrawal from the accord last year. Massive demonstrations are being held across Britain against Prime Minister Boris Johnson's move to suspend Parliament. Organizers say hundreds of thousands of people are taking part in the protests organized under the catchphrase, "Stop the coup." They say protest is the only way to force the government to change course. Johnson's decision to suspend Parliament until mid-October has been widely condemned by MPs and opponents of a no-deal Brexit. The suspension has prompted legal challenges in London, Edinburgh and Belfast. A public petition against the proroguing of Parliament has pulled in more than 1.6 million signatures. Critics of Prime Minister Boris Johnson say he has exacerbated the political crisis over Brexit, but Johnson has warned an attempt by MPs to stop a no-deal Brexit will make it more likely. And defying a police ban, thousands of anti-government protesters have taken to streets for the 13th consecutive weekend in Hong Kong. Police fired tear gas and used water cannons to disperse the protesters. Earlier, police arrested several prominent activists to deter the weekly demonstrations. Protests erupted in the Asian financial hub against a controversial extradition bill back in June. The region's government suspended the bill, but now demonstrators are demanding democratic reforms. Meanwhile, an off-duty police officer was wounded in a knife attack. The police have pledged a comprehensive investigation into the incident. And a group of South Korean lawmakers have visited islands disputed with Japan. The Japanese Foreign Ministry has protested over the trip. 6 Korean lawmakers flew to the islets to protest against Japanese limits on shipments of smartphone chip components. Japan said the Korean lawmakers ignored its call to scrap the visit. Relations between the two countries have deteriorated over compensation for wartime forced labor during Japan's occupation of Korea. The ties soured further when Japan removed South Korea from a list of countries with fast-track export status. Korea followed by scrapping a military intelligence sharing pact with Japan. In Colombia, security forces have killed 9 members of a dissident rebel faction in a raid in the southern San Vicente del Saguan region. President Ivan Duque says a clear message has been sent to the rebel leaders. Last week, dissident leaders of the FARC insurgent group rejected a 2016 peace agreement and announced a return to arms. Colombian President Duque said he authorized a military operation against the resurgent faction. He described them as a gang of narco-terrorist criminals challenging the government's writ. Over 2,000 FARC fighters refused to recognize the peace deal signed 3 years ago. Well, 24 people died when a bus plunged into a stream after a bridge collapsed in a remote area of northern Pakistan. Police say the vehicle was carrying a wedding party when it fell into a gushing channel in the upper Kohistan region. Authorities say the victims belong to the same tribe. Rescue workers are finding it difficult to recover the bodies because of poor telecommunications in the mountainous area. And the U.S. prepares for the deadly Hurricane Dorian as forecasts for the Category 4 hurricane make it the deadliest in the last 3 decades. With statewide emergency declared for hurricane, the coastal areas of the U.S. are expected to experience heavy showers and possible flooding. More details in this report.
The National Hurricane Center says Dorian is even stronger than ever and is now packing 140 miles per hour winds. Every county in Florida is under a state of emergency and preparations are underway to fight the natural calamity that lays ahead. Hurricane Dorian is on track to smack Grand Bahama Island on Sunday and Florida or Georgia coasts around Monday morning. Transportation has been suspended and evacuations are underway.
Let me be extremely clear. Those who refuse to evacuate place themselves in great danger from this very, very powerful and potentially life-threatening hurricane, which will bring dangerously strong and high wind surge.
The storm began Friday over the Atlantic as a Category 2, gained Category 3 strength later in the day. Forecasters predicted the storm would grow more ferocious as it gained fuel from the warm waters of Florida. The storm could roll inland towards Orlando on Tuesday or early Wednesday, weakening as it moves away from the sea. Trump says Florida faces absolute monster hurricane. People have started lining up for gas, stockpiling resources.
But it really began to form and form big, and now it's looking like it could be an absolute monster. We're ready. We have the best people in the world ready, and they're going to help you. We're shipping food, we're shipping water, but it may be that you're going to evacuate. We're going to see what happens. We're waiting. It does seem almost certain that it's hitting dead center, and that's not good.
The U.S. President Donald Trump has cancelled a planned trip to Poland so he can make sure resources are properly directed for the storm.
Hundreds of Congolese children undergo daily health checks for Ebola on their way to school in Uganda. For Ugandans, the medical screening is vital to prevent the spread of the deadly disease in the country. More in this report.
An Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo has killed more than 2,000 people since last August. Up to 18,000 Congolese have crossed the border to enter Uganda, where job and education opportunities are greater. Among the travelers are thousands of children who make the journey alone. They are all methodically screened at the border to ensure they are free of the deadly virus.
Normal days.
On normal days, we always screen around 6,000 to 10,000 travelers.
6,000 to 10,000 travelers.
The Congolese children initially had to face hostility from Ugandan parents. Teachers and health workers are educating the wider community about the realities of the disease.
At the beginning, some of the parents, those parents from Uganda, had a negative attitude, saying that those children from Congo will affect their children. But after teaching them the procedures which we normally follow, then we had to come to a resolution, and that one ended.
The World Health Organization declared Uganda free of the disease in late July, but the latest positive cases have raised alarm and a rush to contain the contagious virus immediately.
Scientists have been developing artificial intelligence to make the lives of human beings easier. In East China's Shanghai municipality, a special art show featuring artificial intelligence has amazed audiences at the World AI Conference. Details here.
The show, titled AI Plus Art, Journey of Wonder, has been staged every evening at the Mercedes-Benz Arena over the weekend. Accompanied with the rhythmic thud of a drum, the show started with a dance performance when two robot arms interacted with a dancer. The show featured 7 performances that integrated artificial intelligence with modern dances, folk songs, opera, and pianists.
When we combine the traditional art performance with the latest technology, we can manage to discover more charm beyond the art performance itself, instead of simply presenting them on the same stage. It sets an important requirement for art workers like us.
Luo Tianyi, a virtual idol created by the Yamaha Corporation, performed a folk song and even co-hosted the event with the real host. Dai Xiaorong, a professor at the Shanghai Conservatory of Music, says combining traditional art with technology creates more charm. She said the inspiring performances encouraged artists to think seriously about art creation.
Through the performances accomplished by artists and technology, the show conveys to people the spirit of continuous learning, inheritance, and innovation in the process of human civilization and technological development.
The show has been powered by techniques involving human-computer interaction, motion capture, virtual reality, holograms, and 3D images.
Now let's take you to the world of business, where factory activity in China has shrunk for a 4th consecutive month, reflecting the impact of the trade war with the US. The National Bureau of Statistics shows the Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index fell to 49.5% in August. Many economists expected the index to stay put at just under 50. Any number below 50 points represents a fall in manufacturing activity. But China's services sector picked up for the first time in 5 months in August. The National Bureau of Statistics say the non-manufacturing purchasing managers index rose marginally to 53.78%. The European aircraft consortium Airbus has won a $5 billion order for 42 passenger planes from a Malaysian airline. Airbus says the AirAsia 10 airline has placed firm orders for 12 long-range A330neo airliners. It has also signed up for 30 medium-range A321 models. While we have our umbrellas and raincoats on standby in Lahore, let's see what the weather is looking like where you live. Well, these are all the latest stories in detail I have for you this hour. For further updates, do stay tuned to Indus News.